Welcome back to the 10 Adventures podcast. Today we are talking to Emily Keddie, an incredible endurance athlete renowned for her fastest known times throughout the American West. We're going to talk about setting goals and pushing through challenges, as well as a couple of the adventures she has done. Hi, Emily. Welcome to the show.
Hi, thank you so much for inviting me.
I'm super excited to have you on. Before we start talking about these incredible endurance adventures you've done, can you talk a little bit about growing up and how you fell in love with the outdoors?
Growing up, I lived on the East Coast, and um, I I don't think in childhood, I remember going on family camping trips, which mostly involved like car camping, driving into a campground where there's a picnic table and setting up a big tent, and going on adventures, hiking and exploring, and also my mom, when I was young, would take us on micro adventures. I remember one stands out. We went to the Baseball Hall of Fame, and we had happened to go there during some huge event or holiday we hadn't realized was happening. So we got to town, and all the hotels were booked. And so we had like part of the adventure was we ended up car camping like in the van, which turned, it was my mom had this way of turning things into just a fun adventure. And that's probably why I have been so comfortable as an adult car camping when I need to, or like living in my camper when I did that for a little while for fun. But um, it wasn't till I want to say mm, college that I really got more into um like visiting national parks and backpacking. I did have a couple of history teachers who in eighth grade, they ran this big kind of backpacking introduction course. And it was just outstanding. They actually published a book on how to do it with middle schoolers. But that was like my first backpacking experience. It was kind of, though, more of a later life experience of falling in love with the outdoors, as you said.
You hold 32 records for fastest known time. These are for summits and through hikes throughout the American West. From such kind of humble beginnings of car camping and, sleeping in the car at the Baseball Hall of Fame, what motivates you now to pursue these records?
In 2020, um, I had just started in the previous year and a half um, ultra running and loved it. Really just fell in love, was pursuing longer and longer distances. Ran my first 100 miler in 2019. So in 2020, I had big, great plans for races. And we know what happened that year. Races really got shut down. I remember just one after another being canceled. And I heard about FKTs from a friend. Um, and it was kind of a way to still get out there and push yourself beyond just your normal training, in a fast way. But while races were all put on hold. Um, it was also a cool way at the time, in 2020, I developed a project because I was out of work, like a lot of people, um, working a lot less. And I came up with this project I called the Yahtzee Project, which was basically just a collection of um, meaningful things I did over the course of the year. I think it ended up being, oh, I can't remember how many, somewhere between like 70 and 100 different things. But it was a collection of like big backpacking routes that I had never done before. Um, Really great, hard running efforts. So again, just kind of routes, but running efforts that I, got a PR, personal record in, or FKTs. And all of those things could be done outside of races. And it just pushed me during 2020 to pursue things closer to home and when I could, further away from home, that were novel to me and just kind of keep me busy. And during a time when everybody was struggling a lot. That gave me something to focus on. And so that's when I discovered FKTs, and I just kind of fell in love with the camaraderie of other people running them, and the notion also of putting together my, like, recently developed love of ultra running with another recent development, which, for better or for worse, but like free soloing, easier climbs, fourth and fifth class climbing. But I could put that together and go light and fast in the mountains to summits. And there's a lot of space in the FKT world for people who might not be the fastest runner on normal trails, but if you're willing to, or you have the risk tolerance to set some records on some of the higher peaks around here. So that really drove me forward.
On one of your Instagram posts, you write, you do a lot of painful things, a lot of things you didn't think you could do at one point in your life, but that you believe you are capable of doing now. And I wonder, did you grow up with this desire to always push yourself, or is this something that kind of grew organically, once you became an adult?
I grew up pushing myself, and I was always high achieving. Um, I want to say type A, but I'm like a weird mix of type A and type B. But definitely, like as far as school was concerned, I was always internally motivated to get good grades, to work hard. I mean, I remember doing extra credit for my first grade teacher, if that says anything. But I also grew up with um, women around me who were very encouraging of me in a specific way. And that was, you know, reinforcing the idea that as a woman, I could be anything. I could be a doctor, I could be a lawyer. Really, the possibilities were endless, but never was that like mountaineer or, guide for the outdoors or, anything like that. It was very much academically higher education focused. And that was really a function of generations of women in my family and what they experienced. So it is kind of funny. I did end up going and I got a PhD in my 20s. I kind of just whipped through school right into grad school. But it kind of tickles me that this is where I'm at now. That I did that, and now the outdoors and outdoor pursuits are definitely paramount in my life. But um, I think those tendencies growing up and from a young age, it's the same mechanisms that I push myself. I just this idea of being a strong woman and kind of taking up space in the outdoors, but balancing that also with, regardless of being a woman, just myself and my personality to really take things to the furthest extent possible and to see what is possible. That's high achieving for sure, just in a different way.
I remember reading something on your Instagram about kind of you having two lives, and there's one part where you write about spending your life trying to conform to society and succeeding, and then you realize that path wasn't for you. Can you talk maybe about that journey for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Very much. I feel like there was a fracture moment in my life, which I've reframed now many years later, and I can see it in hindsight for kind of exactly what it was. But I had gone through school, I got married to a wonderful person, and I kind of had life mapped out. I had a great job. I was a psychologist, um, and over just the span of, I want to say, 6 months, it was almost like I had this little crisis. I'm in my late 20s, and I'm realizing that there's so many things that I want to do, and everyone's asking if I'm going to have a family and when I'm going to start a family, and I've got the house and the backyard and the dog, and I realized that um so many things that I was really itching to do were going to have to wait. till later. And I'm very much not a person like I am the person who's like, don't save it for next year, do it now because you never know if you're going to have next year. Um, and I don't know if that's if part of that is like rebellious because that's very different from what other generations before me in my family. It's a very different way of living. So that might have been some pushback that I developed myself, but um, I yeah, my life changed. I ended up pretty much changing every aspect of my life. I, got divorced and which was very painful and like definitely a pivotal moment. Um, Left my job, moved away, um, hiked the PCT as sort of this at the time it was definitely like an escape from everything, but it shaped everything that came after that. So that's really the difference. And then after hiking the PCT, that really um, drove me to want to spend more time outside. And I wanted to design a life where I could maximize the time outside. And shortly after finishing that, I moved out west and it was like brand new world opened up to explore and discover. And I just knew that I loved it. So ultra running fits in great with that because you spend a massive amount of time outdoors.
I've heard so many people talk about the PCT, the Camino de Santiago, people riding across continents or the worlds. In my case, I walked across the Pyrenees. What is it about this time, do you think, of being in nature and being active that lets, in your case and lots of the people's cases, lets you kind of discover who you are and understand what's important to you?
I think a big part of it is this it simplifies everything. It takes away all of the noise of life because your goals every day are very simple. Walk, eat, get water, um, find a place to sleep every night, and you're carrying everything that you need with you. So all the other noise of life, literally noise, traffic and advertisements and excess stuff that we accumulate, pressures from all different, you know, factors of everyday life. It really, it just takes that away and makes things so much more simple. And I think um, I mean, I recommend that to anyone to have that experience, whether it's for a month or 3 months or 6 months or a year. Um, I think it's a great way to get to know yourself and see what you really crave. Because certainly there were so many other through hikers I met who were satisfied with their through hike and they went, back to their job um and then many who actually are still out hiking who just go on one after another and have kept on doing that. So I think it's a way for people to see what they really want out of life. Um, and regardless of the outcome, it's so beautiful to experience that.
I love the way you describe that. I couldn't agree more. Kind of the impact. You do most of your fastest known time solo, and I was wondering how that fits into the challenge for you. Does solo make it harder, or does it make it easier because you only have to rely on yourself?
You know, both. A lot of them have been done solo purely because I either can't find anyone who wants to do some of them with me, just because of the more risky nature of some of them. Um, Also, sometimes I'm going after a particular record because there may not be a female time on a particular route. And so, um, for me, that's meaningful because, you're paving the way. Hopefully you set a record and then that will in turn encourage another woman to go and break that record. So, being that first person to lay that out. Um, I do enjoy spending time alone. It's empowering. Um, and I feel that I have a really good balance, especially now with between my partner and my friendships. I have a really good balance of time spent with other people, and going on backpacking trips where I'm not alone, and so I can really appreciate the efforts where it's just me. Um, there have been a good amount where I've had a partner, and in some ways, when you add someone else, my general thought is that the more people, the slower you move. I mean, starting at adding one person. That's also mitigated by, having another person is another eye on the route, making sure you have the correct navigation. There's an added safety element. Um, so there's reasons that having a partner is a good idea. And some of my favorite routes have been with someone else too. Um, I like both styles, whether it's with a friend or by myself. Yeah. It's fun to share that kind of a difficult effort, especially if you and your partner work together. It's really rewarding. But I will say that on some of the longer ones where I'm alone, I am so relieved to be done and not to be alone anymore.
That's always the case. That's always the case. It's nice. And then after a certain point, it's like, oh, I really wish I had someone here to talk to or to share this with. And there's just that balance. I don't know what the right distance is, but there's a certain distance or a certain time where it's perfect. But yeah, I know what you're saying.
Yeah, I think of my friend Ashley Winchester is someone who's done tons of FKTs, and she's been a friend but also a big role model, and she's done like she had the John Muir Trail FKT for a while, and I mean multiple nights alone she went unsupported, um and not a ton of communication with the outside world. So I'm sort of dipping my toes when I did the High Sierra Trail this past fall. That was, I think, the longest unsupported effort, and it didn't go overnight. Um, but I'm trying to dip my toes into that a little bit with that, and hopefully a future Lost Coast effort, and a couple others in the works that go through at least one night. But it's intimidating being alone. The longer the effort, especially. And it gets lonely, and when when shit goes sideways, you only have yourself. You don't have anyone there like in a race. There's no aid station with people waiting to encourage you. So it's different.
Can you maybe talk a little bit about fear and courage? I know you have a few posts where you talk about them, but like these are, courage to do something hard and then the fear, like there's scary parts just being alone or challenging technical sections. How do you approach these two issues?
Yeah. Fear and courage, they're so interesting. And part of why I love outdoor pursuits is it gives me time to really put myself in these situations and think about it. I mean, uh, part of the reason I'm fascinated so much, I think, is I'm a psychologist. So human behavior and thought is eh, just something that already is at the top of my interest. But I I have done lots of things that were intimidating. Fear, though, to me is um it's going into something scared. And I don't like to be scared. Um, it's interesting because when I talk about these things, my brain is like already tweaking it a little bit. And I'm coming up with another understanding of myself. But I do not like to be scared or intimidated. Um, and there, um, I guess a lot of that comes from a past relationship where things were not so much in my control. Um, and there was intimidation and fear. And I am so obstinate about not feeling that way again. And I think I just in a way refuse to let things scare me, which isn't to say that I don't ever feel intimidated. I definitely feel like I have to be courageous. Um, but if something scares me, it's almost like, well, I want to do it anyway. It's something to overcome. It's something to prove to myself. And if it's something that I have control over, then all the more so. Um, I feel like there will always be things in our lives. Hopefully not for most of us, like another person that creates fear, but there will always be things that we're fearful of. Um, I love that the outdoors is an area where I can push that and I can like confront it and I can say I'm not going to be scared. I might feel nervous and I might, get really nervous in the dark and see a pair of eyes or see a mountain lion and be like feel like I'm terrified. But I'm out there and if I'm in the dark, it's just the absence of light. And if I'm on a really tricky mountain summit, I just have to be very focused. I very much enjoy and get a lot out of kind of the opportunity to move through um, that fear or that intimidation, um, and continue anyway because I have this narrative that's like you're going to be fine. Um, Focus, do what you need to. There's no reason to be scared. There's no reason to be scared of the outdoors. Like this is my happy place. And unless something really bizarre happens, right? Like, I mean, a mountain lion most likely not going to really attack you. A rock falling and hitting you on a mountain would be a freak accident. So I kind of try to remind myself that a lot of what is feared in the outdoors is just the unknown, and that's why I'm there, like to find that and push myself, if that makes sense.
Definitely, definitely. You just completed a couple weeks ago another record breaking feat in that you did 2 million vertical feet of elevation gain in 2024. So congratulations. That must have, I can't imagine that as, someone who's outdoors all the time. I cannot fathom doing that. Um, and I want to talk a little bit about how you got to that point because it just seems so audacious to even conceive about that and then be able to do it. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about goal setting in terms of, how do you come up with a goal, but even more so, how do you achieve that goal? Because I think so many people have these dreams and these goals, but then they're never able to do them.
I I came up with this goal because for 2024 I wanted something to guide guide my year into I wanted essentially something to be a thread uh, that wove through everything else that I did, if that makes sense. Like I had races I was going to do. I had a bunch of FKTs I was interested in. Um, but I, I need something else to be motivating, something, intrinsic for myself. Um, and I guess the races were enough on their own or something, but I had read about another athlete, other female athlete who had done a lot of vert the year before, and so I wondered if I could do as much as she had. And then often my goals, initially, like they grow and they get bigger, and then they also procreate, and so there's like other goals on top of those goals. So I arrived at this number 2 million, and it's great because I love vert. I love going uphill much more than I love going down. And I just feel like with every footstep upward, I feel strong and capable at the face of it. So um, the numbers were really intimidating. It's like 5,464 feet a day in a leap year, which we had so an extra day. Woo. And I ended up doing over 6,000 feet a day on average. Um, and some of that, the reason it was so much higher is because in the month of December, I just went absolutely apeshit and did a huge month. Um, so, uh, you know, I loved that project. I miss it now because it was just my guiding light all the time. Um, a huge part of setting that goal is that if it was going to be meaningful to me at all, I was gonna be able to find a sense of balance in my life, which sounds crazy because I was like, "How do you balance that?" But it's possible, and, I wanted to share it with as many people as I could and still be able to be a good partner and a good friend and take vacations and go backpacking and have days when I wasn't thinking about how much vert I needed to do or worried about it. So it got creative at times, but man, last year was the most dynamic year I've ever had. I saw some friends more than I usually do, and I did I think like 14 or 15 races and FKTs combined, which is really odd for that that volume of activity. And I saw probably the best performance as the year went on that I've ever had, which is also strange. And I'm still kind of unpacking and figuring out why I was able to essentially get away with that is what it feels like. It makes a lot of sense now, but um, yeah, I tell you, after having such a huge goal and focus for a whole year, it is difficult to come down from that and also to move into this year like, what now? Um, more vert, which is not the answer, at least not now. But I love it. It was like a big experiment for me. Like, again, being, psychology minded, it was what is possible for me. And as a woman, as a person, a person who wants to be well rounded, and yeah, what's it going to feel like? And will I get injured? And what will it look like? What will my racing look like? It was just this crazy experiment, and it was so fascinating and fun to figure it out along the way.
I'm interested about motivation. And so, there's going to be days where you're sick or you're sore or you're tired. How do you push through? Because you can't take a couple of days off when you've got to do so much, or maybe you can, but it just seems it's always like, oh, day 7, I just got to take a rest day. But did you take rest days, or did you listen to your body, or is it just 6,000 vert a day? That's what I got to do.
That's such a fascinating topic because there were some rest days, there were some zeros, but they weren't necessarily intentional rest days as much as I think most often it was related to traveling, um, or after like my biggest races of the year. I think there were a couple of rest days. But it's interesting because we're, in training and being an athlete, um, there's all this about don't ignore your body. And in ultra running, you do. I mean, you really you do at times, but in a very purposeful way. So, like, not in training. That's not the appropriate time to ignore your body. But in a race, for sure. Um, you're pushing forward. You're ignoring little aches and pains as much as you can. Or, your body's like, it's time to sleep now. And you're like, no. Or your body says, okay, you've run 50 miles. That's enough. And you say, no, we're doing 100. Um, and there's more to that, the conditioning and the fitness and aerobic training and all of that that goes into it. But you learn how to suffer really well. And the mental game has to be also really strong. That's you develop so much mental game. So that was really that poised me to do these like back to back. Like I'm going out to do all these climbs today and rack up a bunch of vert, whether it's, 1 or 2 mountains or repeats on the same, 800-foot hill until I get to an obscene amount, like 10,000 feet. Um, Also, there's um, that I think I'm not sure if I'm going to pronounce it correctly, but like the Sisyphean kind of attitude. Uh, is it Sisyphus in Greek
Sisyphus?
mythology? Yeah, it's in Greek mythology who like pushed the boulder up the hill, and it was supposed to be a punishment for bad things while he was alive, and he actually found it very rewarding. And so it's like it's a situation like don't threaten me with a good time. That was kind of I enjoy that process. I enjoy the hard work and the grind. Um and building momentum. That was a huge aspect of the year. Building momentum and not taking a day fully off because if I took a day off and it wasn't because of travel or I was sick or injured, which I was never injured, which is great. But if I just took a day off because I was not motivated, I knew it would be that much harder the next day. And I knew I would regret taking the day off because if I was physically able, like the whole point of like the goal being so huge and so long in duration, you really just have to keep chipping away. And even if you fall short on any given day, which interestingly, even on the days where I really wasn't motivated, because I got myself out the door, those days usually ended up bigger than what I had planned on. And I would be out, I'd hit my goal. I'd say, okay, well, I'll at least do 5,000 feet today. And then I would get to that number and be like, I'll do one more lap or I'll just do a little bit more. Um, And then I would always just feel such a sense of reward from that it just kept rolling in that way. That itself built up so much momentum, and also just feeling capable. I would do bigger and bigger days, and also a little bit about like seeing other people's reaction to it. Or I would drop like 30,000 feet in a 24-hour period, and that's fun and it's challenging, and it's also fun to watch people be like, "What the," um, because that's also just pushing what's possible. I certainly wasn't doing anything that no one's done before, but very, very few. Um, I know a couple people also last year who went over um, 3 million. There was one guy, Noah Dines, on skis who set a world record. Um, and another woman that I know down in the Sierra who went over 3 million on foot. And so, but that's it. I don't know anybody else who's done that much. So it's such a fascinating and weird place to be, kind of alone. It's a little isolating, but luckily the people around me, my partner, his kids, my closest friends, like they have witnessed it throughout the year. So they understand.
I want to talk about one of your FKTs. You mentioned earlier the Lost Coast Trail, and this has always really fascinated me. And can you maybe describe it for listeners who haven't heard about it?
Yeah. Gosh. The Lost Coast is a world renowned um, backpacking route. It's on the northern coast of California, like way up north, north of San Francisco, and it's extremely remote. There is a very small town along, like in the midpoint of the trail, and then really not much at either end. Takes hours of driving and car shuttling, very windy dirt roads. Um, So just very, very remote. Um, it's divided into a northern and a southern section. Let's see, the northern section is about 25-ish miles, and the southern section is longer than that. I want to say maybe 32. Um, maybe just a little less because they're connected by a bit of roadway. Anyway, the northern section is the most popular for backpacking. People usually do like 2 nights, 3 days, and you're really right along the ocean, a mix of beach and kind of rocky shoreline and some grassy bluffs. The southern section is much less traveled, much more um, like rigorous. It goes away from the coastline and up into the mountains. Um, and also gets much more affected by weather. So every year there's a ton of trail work that ends up needing to be done on that southern section. Um, but it's gorgeous, remote. You have to get permits to do overnights there. Um, but there are FKTs on that route for both sections alone, and then also for the full north and south together.
So when I've read about that, it just seems like wild that, California is so packed with people and there's this like prime real estate on the coast and there's nobody there. And I was wondering, is it like kind of stepping into what California was before it was full of people? Like does it actually feel like it's like this artifact of a bygone time, or is there still some development where you're like, oh yeah, no, humans are here, there's just not many of them?
You know, there's a little development. The one town, Shelter Cove, that's kind of in the middle. It's at the yeah, between the northern and southern section. That's there. It is like stepping back in time a little bit. Um, because there's just so few people and there's no cell service, so you're detached from the world. Um, Yeah, I have a similar feeling there as I do in a lot of places in the Sierra, especially once you step off trail, because you can be somewhere like on a summit and open a summit register, and only one person has signed into the summit register in the past year. And you just think, where is everyone? Like, there are so many huge cities in California not far from here, and nobody's out here, which is great. I love it like that. But um, it is so nice to have these wild places, where you can truly feel isolated and alone. The Lost Trail, you are guaranteed pretty much on the northern section to see other people, but not many because there aren't tons of permits available. And also, I just think because it's difficult to travel to, even if you're in California, it's a lot of logistics, um, you know, hours of driving time, and then shuttling a car too, is pretty annoying. So there's that. And on the southern section, it's less likely you'll run into people.
Last question is, I see a range of adventure books behind you. I know I'm a reader. Lots of listeners are readers. Do you have any suggestions you can make for great adventure books, ones that have really, impacted you?
Yes. Gosh, I have to turn around and peek because I've got my full collection of Bill Bryson here. And then oh, I'm a big fan of Gretel Ehrlich. She's a female writer. She writes about the American West in just a very romantic, poetic way. Also Edward Abbey, the Monkey Wrench Gang. He is rebellious in the way that I see myself on the inside. And that book is just wonderful. Made huge impact on me. Um, any oh, man, any of the climbing books, I mean, books about women summiting K2. Um, I got like Touching the Void. Um, yeah. Oh, also, okay, two that stand out. Ranger Confidential, which is a book about what it's like being working in the national parks. Really surprising stories in that book. And then a heavy hitter, the last season, which was about uh, a backcountry ranger in the High Sierra. That um, fascinating read, emotional read, and really did nothing to detract me from wanting to be a backcountry ranger myself. Just the idea of being out there alone seems amazing. But those definitely.
Excellent suggestions, Emily. I've read a few of those, but a few I haven't, so I'm going to add them to my list. I want to say thank you for coming on the show today, Emily. I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much for the opportunity to talk about these things I love.
Where can people connect with you or learn more about all the stuff you're doing?
Yeah. I love to connect with people on Instagram. For as much as I like to think that I can put down my phone and disconnect, I've gotten so much out of just of connecting people. So I always respond. So Instagram, and my handle is Emily in dot the wild. So Emily in and then just a period, the wild. Um I'm on Facebook, but that's just more because older generations in my family are Facebook, and it's just everything that basically goes on Instagram. So that's just under my name, Emily Keddie, and I'm on Strava, and I put everything I do. I don't hide anything, so yeah, all my Strava, and I try to do a little bit of narrative and photos there for cool things, things that I think are cool that I do, and that's again just under my name.
I'll give a thumbs up for your Instagram. It's got really thoughtful written content. Most Instagram is just the photo, but really thoughtful insights. So I definitely recommend, if you want kind of a daily dose of thoughtfulness, definitely subscribe to Emily's Instagram.
Thank you.
And with that, thanks everyone for listening to this episode of the 10 Adventures podcast. We'll be back next week to explore the world and hear about more epic adventures. Bye-bye. Start planning your own adventure by visiting us at 10adventures.com and listen to other episodes of the 10 Adventures podcast on Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or anywhere else you find your podcasts.